Hi, my name's Joe Elliott, lead singer of Def Leppard, and I'm here to talk about our fifth album, Adrenalize. Well, initially, we went straight back to work. I mean, the day after his funeral, we were back in the studio, but it was bullshit. I mean, it really was, because it was like, I think we went through the same thing a lot of people go through when they're dealing with the death of somebody. So you just put your head into work to try and not kind of think about it too much, and I don't know, not get too emotionally kind of distraught that you can't concentrate on anything. We just went back in there. Work. This is what he would have wanted, was what we kept saying, which is right, because he would have done. But we didn't actually sit down there and burst into tears for 2.5 weeks, like I guess most people should, And we just worked and worked and worked, and after 8 weeks, we listened to what we'd done, and it was the biggest load of shit you've ever heard. Because our mind just wasn't on it. We were just trying to occupy the space that he would have been occupying, And like I said, come March, we kind of snapped out of it and got on with it. But it was not so much after he died. It was a bit of a relief all round when Steve died. And I don't mean that to sound cruel, but from his point of view, wherever he is now, he's in a better place, because he was definitely not a happy guy when he was alive. And it was very difficult for us to deal with anything, because when Steve was in the band and when Steve was alive, he was pretty difficult to nail him down to get any work done. He would be so messed up that he just couldn't use anything that he did. And he knew it. I mean, in his heart of hearts, he knew he was letting everybody down, but he was just so ill at this stage that there was nothing you could do about it. And it was a big contradiction in my mind. I never got to grips with the fact that alcoholism is a disease. To me, it was always like, I got that stupid, naive kind of like, well, if you just stop drinking, you'll get better. And they can't, I mean, it's actually a physical thing. And I still find it hard to understand how anybody gets that way, but people deal with their own personal problems in different ways, and Steve really couldn't deal with life in general very well. He was fine when he was with the band and there was a routine where he had to get up and travel to a gig and sound check and shower and do a photo session and be on stage by 9 because the kids had a bus to catch at 11, this kind of thing. He was fine, but as soon as we came off the road and we didn't have a set routine, when you're going in and you're writing songs, you can't just write a song like you can build a cabinet. You either get inspired by an idea, or there is either one there or there isn't. It's not like you can just buy some wood and knock it together. You can try doing that, but it doesn't always work. You have to have something to work on, and consequently your hours are a lot more flexible. And when we didn't have that routine, it's like, well, he didn't have any ideas for a couple of days. He would just get drunk, just go out and drink. And unfortunately, with the success the band's had, he could afford to do it. And there was nothing anybody could do to stop it, It was difficult. But it made it really hard for us to work, because, like I said, we ended up being a 4-piece in the studio a long time before Steve died, just working on the record. Phil had to double up a lot of Steve's parts on this record, and the finished article that you hear now is Phil did every guitar on it, except for the acoustic guitars on one track, which Sav, the bass player, played. So it was really hard for us to deal with, but it was not just the record, it was life in general. We were all working in Dublin, and Steve was in rehab 5 or 6 times before he died, between the last tour and the making of this record. He was in rehab in Florida and in Minneapolis and in Dublin and in London, and he'd be great for the month he was away, and then he'd check out and go straight to the pub, and it just seemed such a waste. And there were definitely times where I felt he was actually abusing the friendship and freedom that we were allowing him, because we didn't want to fire him, because he'd been in the band since 1978. We'd grown up together since he was 17 years old, and he was one of us, and we really, really tried to help him. And the difference between Steve and Pete Willis, who was our previous guitarist, who was also a bit of a drinker, who basically was fired because of his drinking, was at the time, Pete wasn't a particularly nice guy, and Steve was. And it was really difficult to shout at somebody that had tears in their eyes, or they knew they'd be in front of you, unable to stand up and saying, I'm sorry. What can you do? I mean, like, you put on in a sticky situation, really, where it's pretty difficult to just slap them across the face, tie them to a bed. You know, you can't. What can you do? It's the old phrase, the cliche, you know, you're not your brother's keeper, and as much as you can try to be, there are things that you just have to let go, you know. And when he was in rehab in Dublin, I played family member for him because he begged me not to tell his parents that he was in such a bad way. And I feel bad about that I didn't tell him, but I didn't want to be seen as this telltale. So his wishes, you know, I respected his wishes, and I went and played family member for him. And I had to go and sit opposite him in this kind of big circle where there'd be on one side of it all the... when they weren't all alcohol, some of them were gamblers, some of them were drug addicts, and all their family members would be on the other side of the circle, sat opposite, and you had to basically sit there and abuse them in such a way of, like, you know, tell the rest of the people there, embarrass them into saying, this is what you do when you're drunk. And you know, I mean, I was listening to some of these guys. Some of them were farmers that were 70 years old. Some of them were wives. Some of the guys were middle-aged bank managers. And there's poor old Steve sat in the middle, and I'm thinking, he's not one of them. He doesn't belong here. But, you know, reality told me different, because he was. And the same thing had happened to us about 6 months earlier when he was found in a really bad way in Minneapolis. And we all flew over to visit him. And he was on a ward in this, I guess it was a hospital. And it was really like one flew over the cuckoo's nest. I mean, the only thing missing was Jack Nicholson and the Indian, you know. And I'm looking at all these people. It's like one guy stood on one leg, reciting the Lord's Prayer backwards or something. You know, I mean, all this kind of really weird stuff going off. And there's Steve, this rock god. He's got great hair, big skinny guy, jeans on, jacket. And I'm thinking, what the hell are you doing in here? You're not one of them. And then 10 minutes later, you think, well, you know, I guess he is, you know, but I just never seen it before, because rock and roll being rock and roll, you take it for granted that people sort of, they do it because they think it's a great way of not working in a factory or in a bank or a shop. It's like there are no rules, you make your own to a certain degree. But there's a lot more to it than that. You have to be so disciplined to be in a successful band, because you have to do certain things on time. Maybe not releasing albums, but at least going on stage and things like that. And I think, in all honesty, Steve, in his heart of hearts, was maybe a little bit out of place with the actual success of the band. I mean, he enjoyed it, and he enjoyed all the trappings of success, and he loved being on stage in front of a load of people. But I guess if you could have nailed him down and really beaten the truth out of him, he would much rather have been Johnny Thunders than Steve Clark, you know. He'd have been happy playing clubs and just playing a bit more out of tune and a bit more out of time than he had to play in Def Leppard. But he was a great creator. The difference between Steve and, just say, Johnny Thunders was that Steve was a brilliant writer, and he wrote songs that deserved more kind of scrutiny than, say, the New York Dolls songs did. And so he was stuck between two stools in that respect. He was writing songs that needed this treatment, but he really wanted to play them a little bit more. And I think that was one of the problems he had, was dealing with just the way that we worked, was a little bit not to his maybe natural ability. But it was good for him in a certain extent as well, because it furthered his playing. It improved him as a player. It definitely improved him as a songwriter. And he always pulled his weight when it came to contributing ideas to the band. He was, very, very fluent when it came to, like, throwing ideas in. Not in our eyes, there wasn't, because we were, although we didn't have the songs recorded properly, we had these, at the time we had 6 finished songs, which had been 10 and then had gone down to 8 and then gone back up to 9 and then gone back to 6 again, that we were, like, really happy with, this basis of songs that we knew we had some more to do, but they were too good to waste, and there was no way we were just going to let these things sit on, on a spool of tape for the rest and never come out, you know. And all due respect to Steve's death doesn't affect Def Leppard the way Freddie Mercury's affects Queen. Queen cannot possibly go on without Freddie Mercury. Def Leppard can carry on without Steve Clark. We've proved it because we've carried on so far as a four-piece. We've got the record finished, and it sounds like a Def Leppard record, which wasn't as difficult as it could have been because Phil was pretty on the ball when it came to doing all the guitars. And he knew that they needed orchestrating the way that we've always orchestrated before. We never really thought about it because you sit there and you say to yourself, well, if he was capable of contacting us, he would say, you got to be mad to split up now. You got to get somebody else, you know. Because there were times in the past where Steve had actually said, look, you know, I know I'm screwing up badly, and if you want to get somebody else in, then I'll willingly step down. But nobody wanted to fire the guy. You know, the nearest thing we came to firing Steve was about 4 months before he died. We said, look, this is getting nobody, and, you know, nobody's getting anywhere with this. We're just going around in circles, and it's just not doing anybody any favours. We think you should take some time off. Don't worry about the record. We'll get on with doing the vocals, we'll get on with doing the bass, and just, you know, Phil can do some guitars and this kind of thing. You go home and get yourself together. We gave him 6 months leave of absence, basically, on a very informal basis. He wasn't fired. We just said, look, being in this work situation was doing his head in. And we said, the best thing you can do is go home and work at your own pace. So he went back to London. He bought a house in London, moved in with his girlfriend, put a little demo studio together in one of the bedrooms. And it was all looking really good. And he was on the phone saying, it's great, this is brilliant, I'm so glad I'm doing this. 4.5 months later, he died. So he never really got the chance to come back, you know, in February or March of last year and say, right, I've got some songs and I'm ready to go, you know, because during that time off, as much as he was maybe working 3-4 hours, he was drinking the other 20, you know, and it killed him. Not really, no, because I think it's just that Def Leppard is such a successful band that anything that we do in that respect is just reported in the press. I mean, everybody has throat problems. I remember back in the early 80s when Paul Di'Anno was in Iron Maiden, they were forever cancelling gigs because of his throat. AC/DC did it. The beginning of the Joshua Tree tour, Bono went through hell with his voice. Still got great reviews. But, you know, it was reported he was losing his voice. Ozzy loses his voice. Everybody loses their voice. I lost mine, and it just got talked about, you know. In 14 years, we've had one death, and we've lost an arm. And they're the most tragic things that have happened to us. And I think more things have happened to lesser bands that just haven't been reported. I mean, somebody was telling me the other day that the Grateful Dead have lost keyboard players like Spinal Tap have lost drummers, you know. 3, I think it is. And nobody thinks they're cursed, and we're definitely not cursed. I know a few people have joked about it. You know, John Bon Jovi won't travel in the same car as me. But other than that, you know, I don't think anybody really takes it seriously. I just think that it's just one of those things. I don't know. Maybe it is payback time because we didn't, as a lot of people might, your Rory Gallagher's of the world might say, or your Robin Trowers may turn around and say, well, Def Leppard never paid their dues because we formed kind of early 78. We had a record deal by mid-79, and we had a top 20 album by March 1980 in England, you know, and an album that did reasonably well for the time it was released in America. Although it only got to number 51, it was considered reasonable success for a debut album. Not really in the same league as Van Halen or anything, or Boston's first record, which shot through the roof. But I don't really consider that such a short period of time because, as far as my memory serves me, which is not that good, the Beatles and the Stones had records out a lot quicker than that, and they were up the top a lot quicker than we were. But I guess, you know, it's just different for every band. What I have noticed about the things that have happened to us, the negative things that have happened to us, they've always happened when we're not actually together as a band. Rick lost his arm when we were on a Christmas break, and Steve died when he was away from working with a band. Obviously, I lost my voice through singing, but I mean, we'd just stepped up from doing 45 minutes as a support act to having to headline nearly a 2-hour show 3 nights a week, and I'd never done that kind of work before. And I guess it was like an athlete not warming up before a marathon and expecting to get through 26 miles without getting cramp, and I wasn't used to that kind of punishing schedule, and that's why I lost my voice. But it came back in a fashion. But everything seems to happen while we're kind of off the road, When we're as a band, nothing bad happens. When we're as a band, good things happen. The albums get done to a good standard. We seem to set a precedent that everybody seems to want to copy. And they never quite get it, which is great for us. And when we're out on tour, by the end of the tour, things have normally picked up in such a way that it's like, happens to be the biggest tour of that year, or close tour, which for us, a bunch of scumbags from Sheffield, is pretty good, Well, good question. Peter Mensch, our manager, and Cliff Bernstein, his partner, we hate thinking of album titles. All we want to do when we're in the studio is get the songs done. It's like, what are you going to call the album? It's like, I don't care what we're going to call the album. Who cares? Let's just call it Mickey Mouse, anything. It doesn't matter. It's like, it's always the last thing. It's the big panic. We'll have the record finished and the sleeve's not done because we can't think of a title, and it's holding up the release of the record. So we ran a competition in the fan club for kids to come up with an album title, and we were getting some classic names, but none of them were good. The best one we had actually was Trouble at Mill, and that's for those that don't know, is a very kind of Python-esque Yorkshire phrase, and we couldn't think of anything. And Peter and Cliff, our management, were suggesting things that were summaries of what had happened to the band over the last 4 years, which basically were very negative. And we didn't want that. We wanted an album title that summed up the 10 songs and the mood of the record, which was much more important than we've been miserable for 4 years and our guitarist died sort of title. And Adrenalize came up. Basically, the word adrenaline sparked it off. We figured that these 10 songs were really up, more so than the last album. It's a lot less mid-tempo and a lot more energetic than the last record. The energy that we had on tracks like Armageddon It, Gods of War, and say Pour Some Sugar on Me was the essence of what we wanted to kind of capture on this record, and with that kind of power behind it, not necessarily fast but powerful. And we figured that it was a good adrenaline rush, and that just kind of drifted around for a few weeks. And then when I think Phil suggested that we call the album Adrenaline, and it just got bastardized to Adrenalize. And the word, as far as I'm aware, actually doesn't exist, which I thought was quite cool. And the fact that it's a word that doesn't exist is a very again, it's like, you're making your own rules, you're inventing your own words. And the other thing I like about it as well, and that we like about it as a band, is that Adrenalize actually is the present tense. It's not the past or the future tense, it's the present tense, which means that the music, the title doesn't date. It's not adrenalized and it's not adrenalizing or whatever. It's just Adrenalize, which is sort of present tense, and hopefully will still sound that way in 10 years' time, which is something that we've always tried to have a handle on. It's like we make records and we say, yeah, this sounds good now, but we want it to sound as good in the year 2010 as it does in the year 1992. And I think Hysteria still sounds like it only came out last week, production-wise. Which is why we've always gone for kind of over-the-top sounds, because it just, if it's ahead of its time, sort of, or as near as you can get to kind of producing that, it means sooner or later it'll catch up with itself, but maybe it's in 10, 15 years, Well, we gave him a credit as executive producer, which was like an honorary credit, because Mutt was doing the Bryan Adams record and was unavailable to produce the record. Otherwise, we would have probably worked with him, because we've always had this thing, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And we work really well as a team. I guess it's one of the reasons that the Beatles stuck with George Martin for so long. And, maybe, Queen stuck with Roy Thomas Baker for such a long time. We work well together, and it's always been a kind of a fruitful relationship. We've learnt a lot of him. And he enjoys working with us as a band. One of the few bands he ever has enjoyed working with, because we just get on really well. He's a big Ipswich Town which is a soccer team in England, fan, and so soccer's a common denominator on like coffee times. Like, let's put the telly on, see if there's any soccer on. And he's an old hippie, but he's a rock and roller at heart. But he's got such great ears, and he's got such an eye for a song, such an ear, I beg your pardon, for a song, that he will turn a great song into something unbelievable. He'll turn a good idea into a great idea, and he'll suggest things that, as an outside ear, that we sometimes just miss because we're so involved in it. And he comes in and he acts as a good referee in that respect. But having worked with him for three previous albums, we knew we weren't really going to get him as producer on this one. So we didn't manage to nail him down for a few weeks to kind of go over the songwriting thing. So we sat down and basically we wrote the songs with him. We'd all come in with our ideas, and he would, Phil would come in with a song, and I would come in with a few words written down and a few chords or something, and Sav would do the same thing. And Mutt would say, right, Joe's song, I want to take your chorus and we'll turn it into and we'll use that as the verse. And then Phil's thing we'll use as the bridge, and Sav's thing we'll use as a chorus. Or if we don't have a chorus, we'll sit down and write one there and then, come up with an idea for one. And whoever come up with the best idea, that's what would get used, whether it be Mutt, Rick, Sav, me, or Phil, or Steve when Steve was around. And the best idea always wins. It doesn't matter who it is, So we wrote the songs with him, and we basically co-produced the album ourselves with Mike Shipley, who has in the past been Mutt's engineer. And as regards Def Leppard, he engineered. He mixed the High and Dry album, he engineered the Pyromania album, and he mixed Hysteria. So he's worked with Mutt for 10 years, he's worked with us for 10 years. We knew each other inside out, and we knew that if we weren't going to work with Mutt, but we wanted those same sort of futuristic or modern big production elements, the next best thing was going to be the two of us working together. And in fairness to Mutt, the executive producer thing, not just because of the songs, but he was always there on the end of the phone if we needed a bit of advice. He'd say, Mutt, we're stuck on this bit, we're really not sure what to do. We'd play it over the phone and he'd say, well, try this, try that, And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but he was always willing to take the phone call. So we figured it was the gentlemanly thing to do, really. Yeah, we do. We get limited not by our imagination, but by what the equipment we're doing. We get all the modern. The trouble we have is this: we don't like to do the same thing twice, and that might, to the average ear, they might not hear a vast difference between Pyromania and Hysteria. They may not hear a vast difference between Hysteria and Adrenalize. But to us, because we're so tuned in, having worked with Mutt, we do hear a big difference between certain things. And 4 years after the last album, Phil plugs up his regular guitar sound, and it's not quite as good as he thought it was. Or he's got tired of it, and he wants something new. So we go out looking for different equipment, and a lot of the time we actually spend in the studio is just trying to get the right sounds for the parts. And that means if you're working on something you've never used before, you have to experiment for a long time to get it exactly how you think it wants to be. And sometimes you do it with a certain sound. If it's a guitar part, for example, you do it with a certain sound, and it sounds okay, but 3 weeks later, it's not right anymore. So you have to go back and do it again with a different sound. So that's we know what we want, but we don't always know how to get it. It's very strange. It's like anybody, really. You can know that something's not right in your life, but you don't really know how to put it right. But one day, something just clicks, and you go, hang on a minute, I know what's wrong. And you either go out and get divorced, or you go out and get married, or you have a kid, or you take up golf, or you stop drinking, or, in our case, it's like, you realise that there's an arrangement problem with a song, or there's the lyrics are useless, or it's in the wrong key, or just the guitar parts, or, maybe just the bass drum is wrong. It could be anything as minute as that, which does it in. But once we get in the studio, it doesn't take us a long time to write a song. We can write the song in a day. We can write and finish and demo a song within 2 or 3 days, and we demo it straight onto multi-track, which means that we basically then just re-record over the original tape. We don't do it again. We've always found when we make demos, it's impossible to improve on them. They have such a sound. You put all the echo on and you make them sound like you did them in like Wembley Stadium. And when you actually try and recreate that in an album situation, it never sounds as good. So we cut out the middleman in that respect and demo straight onto master, and then just keep updating the sounds and going in and making the performance better. But I guess the problem we have is the fact that we have the luxury to do it. We don't have people saying, right, we want the album in 3 months or your contract's going to be torn up. Because they know if they did that somebody else would sign us, you know. So we're in a situation that's like, it's very kind of Leppard friendly in that respect. And, you know, we do not abuse it, but we take advantage of that situation. And in all honesty, we've always been fans of quality rather than quantity. And if Def Leppard lives and dies having only put out 6, 7, 8 albums, we'd rather do that than put out 21 that could have been 8 brilliant records. We'd rather put the waffle, you know, in the bin and put out the good stuff, you know. Right, first song, Let's Get Rocked. Let's Get Rocked is and should be taken with a very heavy pinch of humour. It's I think it's pretty obvious that we've been watching The Simpsons a lot, and we didn't want to fall into the trap of, because of what had happened to Steve, writing more songs for the album, of which Let's Get Rocked was one of them. We were 6 songs, very happy with the 6 songs, and we had 4 that needed either tarting up or writing. I think what we had out of the 4, that we wanted to put out a 10-track record this time instead of a 12-track record. So we had the 4 basic ideas. We either had 1.5 songs finished with, like, you know, 2.5 songs to write, sort of thing. Let's Get Rocked was the last thing done. It was written in about 2.5 days, recorded in 10, which for us is like phenomenally fast. And because this was all written after Steve had died, it would have been very easy for us to kind of write a lot of songs about that experience, and it would have sounded a bit morbid, you know, and sort of like taking advantage of the situation. So we decided to do the complete opposite, and instead of making like this heavy metal Leonard Cohen record, we went out there to try and make something that was a bit of fun, that went back to the humour of, say, some of the early Queen albums, where they had that vaudeville sound, you know, like Killer Queen or Lazing on a Sunday Afternoon, with a bit of the humour of glam rock, things like Gary Glitter and Slade. And say, having watched The Simpsons, the whole character, the lyric is all about a kid who basically is having one of those relationships that you tend to have with your father when you're 16 or 17 years old, where you won't take out the trash and you won't walk the dog and you won't mow the lawn. And it's just this kid just wants to go out and just rock and roll, you know. And it's, as I've said before, it's very deep and meaningless. And we're quite proud of the fact that it is, because I think that people like Sting and, to a lesser extent, Peter Gabriel and people that, and REM and maybe Midnight Oil, that everything they write about, well, not everything, but they seem to be very, what's the word, environmentally aware. I think it's good to have an alternative to that. I mean, obviously, we don't want the planet to die either, and I guess everybody tries to use environmentally friendly products, you know, whether it be the hairspray or the washing up liquid, you know. We don't have to sing about it, and I think it's nice to have an alternative. All these bands are relevant. I think they're good. I think REM stand for a very positive thing, as do Midnight Oil, as does Sting and his Rainforest thing, and Geldof with Live Aid and all this kind of thing. It's very relevant. But so is rocking all over the world, and so is Tie Your Mother Down, and you know, as far as we're concerned, so is Let's Get Rocked. So we just put this little arrangement together, which basically was just a complete vehicle for the voice. There's like hardly anything going off on the verse. It's just me singing in a very kind of Prince Bolan-esque way. The lyric about this kid that's like just wants to be a lazy pig, just hang out, reading Hustler, watching the Playboy channel and going to rock gigs and things like that, which I guess it's very Hollywood in its in the way it could be taken, but it's actually supposed to be very tongue-in-cheek and just some lazy kid, you know. I mean, I actually sing it, and it sounds very Americanized the way it's been done, but that again is intentionally humorous in that respect. You can't sing the word dude in a Yorkshire accent. So it has to be done in a kind of a transatlantic accent. And again, I'm playing a character role. It's not necessarily me. I'm just the guy that's singing it. It's you have to be a bit of an actor as well when you're singing a song, and you have to change your tact for a different lyric, different approach. It's the first single off the album, and because of the nature of the song, it really needs to be, because it's supposed to be a bit of a humorous thing, and jokes don't get better with repeating them. So it needs to kind of be out pretty early, otherwise people might either miss the point or get tired of it. The second track on the album is a song called Heaven Is, which is, I really think it's probably the most, one of the most commercial things we've done, but in a real positive way. It's got these like kind of real Beach Boy harmonies in their actual structure, but they're sung like Slade, which is what we've always tried to do. We've always tried to be like Queen, but with Slade's kind of yelling, capabilities. And again, it's the age-old yearning for the woman sort of lyric, which we tend to do very well because we tend to do it all the time. But it's got a great beat. It's really grooving along. It's a riff we've had. The guitar part is a thing that we never got right. We've worked on it for years and never quite got it. And we always knew it would fit into a song one day. And all of a sudden we sit down and we have this idea, and Sav says, "What about such and such?" And it's this guitar riff. Bow, bow, ow, ow. And it's like, yeah. And then we just worked on the lyric and worked on the harmonies. And as in a lot of our songs, the actual lyrical content really isn't that important, because I don't care what anybody says. As much as lyrics are important, the tune is what you hum. People go around whistling the tune. They don't go around whistling the words. So in that respect, we've always gone for the sound of the words much more than the actual content. I'm never going to win an award that Bob Dylan's going to win, but it still paints a good picture, and Prince does it a lot. He writes lyrics that sound good. Cream Shaboogie Bop, or Bowling, the way a hubcap diamond star halo. I mean, what the hell is one of those? But who cares? It sounded great. And that was a big influence on me as a kid, and sticks with me now, and it works, and it's just nice that, some people get, they like to write lyrics that, or they're very kind of comic book, like Boy's Own and things like this, whereas we've always just gone for the image and the sound of it. And with Heaven Is, it's very much that way, just paints a picture where the listener can imagine it their own way. And I guess everybody that listens to it that likes the song will picture the scene that we've painted a completely different way. It's the difference between reading a book and watching the film. When you read a Stephen King book, the monster doesn't look like the one that Dino De Laurentiis put on the screen for you or whatever, because you use your imagination, and that's the way that we've always tried to do it. Whereas if you make your lyrics too blatant and too obvious, there's nothing for the listener to think about. So that's why ours are pretty obscure in that respect. Third song is a song called Make Love Like a Man, which, again, for all the feminists that would get offended, please don't. It's only a bit of a laugh. Phil came up with the initial riff and hook, and he said, like, I'm not sure about this. I think we might offend a few people. It's like, make love like a man, And I think it was me and Mutt was sat and we said, you got to be joking. Like, it's obviously, if you get a sense of humour, come on, people have really got to pick up on the fact that it's tongue-in-cheek. Who's tongue in whose cheek, I don't know, but it's a very positive thing. It's like Women off the last album. We thought a few people might think it was sexist, but it was actually putting a woman on a pedestal, to be quite honest, and saying how wonderful they are, which is basically what everybody in the band thinks about women most of the time. And the same thing with Make Love Like a Man. It's the friendly aggression of getting your partner and throwing her down on the mattress, or her throwing you down on the mattress if you're lucky. And again, it's just a humour thing, We didn't want to get stuck in that kind of, they're all miserable mode. So, we like to dance around a little bit of controversy, I guess you'd call it. But it's not really meant to be controversial. It's just a bit of fun. The fourth song is a song called Tonight, which we've had for a while and never quite got right. We demoed it originally, I think, in 1985, that long ago, and it lost the toss with Love Bites for the last album because it wasn't finished. And we always knew that one day we'd dig it out and mess with it. And the things that we found wrong with it were so minuscule. When you actually listen to the original version to the version that's on the record, it's hardly any difference, but they made such a difference in the arrangement and the actual sound of the record. It's like, yes, we've got it right, you know, and it was just like a harmony here and a little bit of interjection between a couple of verses there and that kind of thing, and completely re-recording it. And it sounds fresh, you know, nobody would really know, apart from the fact that I've just let the cat out of the bag, that it's been around for such a long time. But, you know, it's an old song to us, but it's brand new to everybody else, and that's the most important thing. There's a potential audience of 10, 15 million people out there that are going to say, wow, this is great, you know. And we didn't want to leave it off just because, like, oh, God, we've been playing this song for so long, you know. In actual fact, we hadn't been playing it for so long. We did it for a couple of days, a few years ago, and it just got shelved because it wasn't right. And this was the time to dig it out and work on it. Many people have done it. I mean, I hear stories all the time that Tattoo You by the Rolling Stones, which came out in 81, there's a lot of songs that have been knocking around since the early 70s that they just never quite nailed. And for that reason, if that is true, you listen to the record and you think, well, this definitely sounds like classic Stones, you know. It's probably the last good album up until Steel Wheels, I think. And it works, you know, and if they can do that, and if indeed they did do that, if they didn't, I apologise. If they did, then that's one of the reasons that we weren't afraid to do it. Because a lot of people I speak to, they say, oh yeah, we got this song, but we can't use it because we've had it too long and it's like, it's outdated now. But, you know, I turn around and say, well, it's outdated to the five of you, but you've got a big audience out there that have never heard it. So it's like, just leave it for a while and then come back to it with a fresh ear and see what you come up with, which is exactly what we did with that one. The fifth song is a song called White Lightning. This was the second last song that got written and the last song to get finished, and is the only song on the album that is has any references to what happened to Steve. The song is actually inspired by what happened to Steve, but not actually about him. It's our obligatory serious song. We always seem to do one or two per album. The last album we had a song called Gods of War. On Pyromania we had Billy's Got a Gun and Die Hard the Hunter, which sounds very Vietnam, but was actually inspired by the Falklands War. And on this one, White Lightning, we basically, musically, it demanded a serious lyric because it was a very kind of album track sounding thing, you know, like a Zeppelin, Purple, Hendrixy thing or whatever, not a Slade T-Rex kind of rhythm. So we couldn't have really written, you know, a poppy lyric to it, and we wanted to do something that reflected the things that Steve had gone through and the things that we went through dealing with Steve, but we wanted to do it in a semi-obscure way, so it didn't just cover Steve, and it didn't even just cover alcohol. It was written so it covered any kind of vice, whether it be alcohol, drugs, gambling, you know, infidelity, whatever you want, anything that's like dangerous, potentially dangerous to your mental health, physical health, or whatever. So somebody can listen to it and think, yeah, I can see how that relates to Steve. They may say, but it also relates to my older brother who's got a heroin addiction or whatever, you know, or my husband who's, you know, gambles all his wages away. So we wanted to write it in such a way that it covered a broader base, because we've tried writing lyrics that nail and really hone in on things, and we never quite get it right. We're better off being broad about it. And the opening lyric being, no promises, no guarantees. So when you get down here, you're already on your knees. It paints such a great picture of like hell on earth. Not necessarily you've died and gone to hell. It could be that if you want. It's whatever the listener really wants, you know. And it also could be hell on earth, which is a guy that's going that way. It could be about Steve Clark, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison. It could be about some guy that everybody probably knows one that's like, if he's not careful, he's going to be the next to go. So you don't have to be alive or dead. You can be anything, you know. And it's for the moment at least. It's definitely in the running as one of my favourites on the album, just because it's different to anything else on the record, and things that are different stand out a little bit, you know. The next track is called Stand Up, brackets, Kick Love Into Motion, close brackets. This was the first song that got wrote for the album. If anybody in England, I don't think it's actually been shown in America, but we made a documentary for the BBC, which got shown in 1989. It was called Rock of Ages, and there's shots of us in the studio. There's a classic bit of Phil playing the solo where he he got the end bit wrong. Fair play to him for letting it go out. And anybody that saw that will have heard this song. It was the first song that we wrote. We actually sat down and wrote. Phil was tinkering with the riff while we were actually out on tour. We had a little, I say little, we had a 12-track portable studio out on the road in case we came up with any ideas, which would save a lot of time when we came off the road. And he was messing around with this for a while, and it was Phil's riff, and basically his idea, title-wise, the hook was one of Phil's. And when we got in the studio and honed down the arrangement of the song, me and Mutt sit down and mostly co-write all the lyrics. But if there's a basis of an idea there, we'll take it and work on it. And Phil came up with this idea. Excuse me. He came up with this idea, and we just finished it off, basically. And it's one of those like lulling mid-tempo things that's, I think, it'll probably be a single at the end of the day. But who knows? You know, we've had people telling us we've got 5 singles. We've got people telling us that we can put all 10 out as singles if we want. God knows what we're going to do for B-sides. The next song on the record is a song called Personal Property, which, again, it's the singer's beating his chest about a woman, as usual. And but the difference is it's very 90s in its approach. It's not meant to be personal property as in, like, you know, handcuffed to your wrist sort of thing, but it's I think it's a song that a lot of couples would get off on, whether they be boyfriend, girlfriend, or man or wife or whatever. I guess it's just a case of us maturing a little bit, whereas 10 years ago it would have definitely been a case of like just written the same way that things like Honky Tonk Woman was written, you know, just the kind of stereotyped macho thing. It was very much singing the praises of a woman, but it's actually my woman sort of thing. And again, we always like to do it so when the people are listening to it, the guy can think, yeah, that's me and that's my girlfriend or whatever. Or the girlfriend can think, yeah, that's the way, hopefully, that my old man thinks about me or whatever. And it's, I guess a lot of it, in all honesty, is very much because of the age thing and the 90s thing, you know, where it's, monogamy is like in, you know, and rightfully so, for a lot of reasons, obvious reasons. And the whole idea of the lyric is basically just hands off, she's mine, so you can look but don't touch, you know. We can all go window shopping. What's that? Somebody said to me the other day, you go to an art gallery but you don't have to buy the paintings, you know, so you can look but don't touch. And I think it works really well. It's a real up-tempo song. It's got some really cool guitar bits. There's a great breakdown section in the middle, which the guitars build really nicely on. I get to do this rap thing on, and it just builds really well into the guitar solo. Big old chorus thing. Sounds sort of like a cross between Queen and AC/DC, I guess, with, you know, the obvious Leppard kind of coat of paint over the top, you know. The next song is a song called Have You Ever Needed Someone So Bad, which is definitely in the running as one of our longest ever titles. It's another, I wouldn't call it a ballad like Tonight. It's more of a power ballad in the mode of something like Purple Rain, really. It's just a 2-chord loping verse thing. Big old chorus harmonies, and it's nice. It's a song that I get the chance to really sing because I'm not screaming my arse off trying to reach the notes. Like, I can understand why Planty kind of stopped doing that after Zep 2 because it gets a bit boring being this kind of screeching hyena all the time. To do that is great, but to do it for 10 songs is like really annoying, and I can't really listen to it. And it's nice to vary a little bit. We experimented a lot on the last album of changing keys and doing songs that were really awkward for a guitar to be in. You like Pour Some Sugar on Me is in something like C sharp, which would be a lot easier if it was in A. But A is such a common key for the guitar that it basically limits your vocal range. So when we experimented on the last album of changing keys to suit the voice, it worked so well that we just took it for granted that we were going to do it this time, that we'd have an idea for a song and we'd literally play it everywhere on the guitar, and I would sing over the top of it until we found a range that was a combination of comfortable and clarity. I could sing something lower, but it would be too low and sound like Tom Waits. So we do it where it's not such a struggle, but it's like a great range. So it's a bit of a compromise. Sometimes they say, can you just go up one semitone and make life easier for me, please, on the guitar? And I can do it, but if it's go up like a fifth, it's like, forget it. I don't want to sing it up there. It's too difficult, So on this particular song, as on a couple of the others on the album, the verse is like low and whispery, and it builds up to a climax where you don't mind, kind of busting your balls a little bit to get the high notes, because you're not doing it all the way through the song. You do it all the way through the song, you tend to get this Scanners effect, and your head just bursts, and it's like, it's time to go home, I think. But again, apparently it could be a single. We just write these songs, and people keep telling us that they're singles. We don't really we don't sit down and we've got to write a single and just like try and copy every hit single's ever been. It just comes out like that. It's not a conscious effort. We've always made a conscious effort to have songs that have got a commercial sound about them, but we don't actually try and write. Well, it's all got to have only 3 chords because that's what a hit single is. It's like whatever it is whatever it is, But it works, it works. It's a good song. I like it a lot. The next song on the album is a song called I Want to Touch You, which is definitely the most commercial thing we've ever written. Actually, I did say that about Heaven Is earlier on, but this is definitely very, very glammy. Obvious connections with Gary Glitter. Lyrically, it was actually Rick Allen's hook. He came in with a song. God knows how. I mean, Rick's very limited in his efforts to write songs because he can't play a guitar with one arm very well. He comes up with melodies and hooks and things and sings them into tapes, which works, And he came in with the hook, I Want to Touch You. Different melody to what we use, but it was basically based on his idea. And the verse was a chorus out of a song that I'd written, which was tentatively called High Over You at the time, and we actually even stole the lyric and changed it to High on You, which is the first line of the song. So this is how sometimes a lot of our songs get written. I'll come in with a tape of like maybe 3 or 4 supposed songs, and Phil will do the same thing, and they just get torn apart, and Sav will do the same thing. And on the last album, for example, on the track Hysteria, it literally was a bit part song. Sav wrote the verse, Phil wrote the bridge, and Steve wrote the chorus. And then Rick suggested the title, and me and Mutt wrote the lyrics. I mean, and it worked, and sometimes that's the way it always... It sounds very clinical, but it's only like, yeah, I've got this bit that'll go great on the end of your bit. Oh, no, I've got this bit that'll go great on the end of that. It's like, let's change the key, and that's the great thing. You sit around in a circle, look at each other, do it all on acoustic guitars even, and just bounce ideas off each other. And sometimes you end up with like too many bits, and you pull one of them out and you save it and you use that, and you write another song now, from the piece that got pulled out of another one. It's like, it's a great verse. All we need to do is write a chorus and bridge. Let's do it tomorrow, I Want to Touch You was very much that way. It was, like I said, the verse was a chorus out of a song I wrote, and Phil improved the guitar riff because I can't play that kind of stuff. It's just block chords for me. And he came in and did the guitarizing of the riff, as it were, or of the actual chord sequence. He riffed it up a bit. And him and Sav, and I think Steve on that one, and yeah, I think Steve was on that one, I'm not sure. They finished it off, and then me and Mutt went in and finished all the melodies and lyrics off, based around Rick's title. And it is, I think, the most commercial song on the record. And the last track is an old favourite. It's a song called Tear It Down, which initially came out as a B-side of the first single off the last album, a completely different version. And we used to do it live, and when we actually recorded it, we all said, "Oh man, I wish we could have put this on the album because it's got such a good energy about it." But it was too late. The album was mastered and it was coming out. We had 12 tracks already. We didn't need another one. So I said, well, let's just wait and see how we go on the next album. You know, maybe it'll sit well on the next album. So when we did the MTV Music Awards in 1989, we decided instead of doing Pour Some Sugar on Me or Love Bites, we'd do Tear It Down just to be different and awkward, you know. And it got such a great response. It got added on in America. It got a load of radio stations picked up on it, and it kind of went top 5 in certain cities. And it wasn't even available. It was just on airplay and on requests. We kind of went top 5. And we had a lot of guys from the record company saying, that's a great song and you really got to put it on the record. So between the management and the response from the radio stations and kids writing to the fan club and people that nobble you on the street and say, hey man, Tear It Down, cool song. We all looked at each other and said, well, I think we're going to be a bit of a foolish bunch if we don't use it. So we went in and instead of using the last version, obviously we went in and did a brand new recording of it, which is a lot better sounding than the last version. And it's a great song to finish the album because it's really high energy. It's got that kind of AC/DC stomp thing about it. And it's just a really good song to end the album with. And I'm really glad we did do it because it balances the album out really well. Yes, we've done one so far, which is a bit of a strange fish, actually. We've done a video for Let's Get Rocked, which is using a brand new animation technique that's never been used before to the extent that we're using it. And it's if it works out half as well as the storyboard looks, it's going to be unbelievable. We shot our part of it over a 2-day period, which were a 16-hour and a 19-hour day. The second day we were up at 8. We were in our regalia and whatever by 8:15 in the morning, and we didn't finish till 3 o'clock in the morning. It was a long day, but it was worth it, you know, because we did a video with this guy called Steve Barron, who he did the Money for Nothing video for Dire Straits, and previous to that the Aha video, Take On Me, which both use an animation technique which was unique at the time, and this again is hopefully the same thing. I sort of now feel I know what Bob Hoskins went through when he made Who Killed Roger Rabbit, because I had to run up at a staircase that didn't exist and grab hold of a microphone that didn't exist because they're going to animate it in at a later stage. I have no idea what the video looks like. All I know is that he's very happy with the footage of us he's got, and the actual animation is going to take 5 weeks working 24 hours a day to complete. So it's a big job. And they've got these 4 guys that are doing it in 12-hour shifts. 2 guys work 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And the other 2 guys take over 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. and the other guys get some sleep. They've rented this house, they've got all the gear in this house, and they're just beavering away at this thing, trying to get it finished. But it's going to be, it's 5 weeks to get it finished. But it's going. I have no idea what it's going to look like. But hopefully, as I said earlier, if it looks anything like the storyboard, it's going to be superb. They're going to animate cymbals melting. They're going to animate me going up this spiral staircase. The basic idea of the video is it's the lyric for Let's Get Rocked being about this kid not wanting to do what his old man's telling him to do. Is the animated kid? We've christened him Flynn. Don't ask me why. That was an idea of Steve Barron, the video director. They've called him Flynn. He's the main character in the verses, and we basically just appear in and out on the verses and mostly in the choruses. And he's just this kid strutting along the street, you know, and he turns into a dustbin and he turns into a violin and he turns into all sorts of things. And my microphone turns around on me and starts singing at me. And I mean, it's going to be great. It really is. But it's and he turns into a guitar as well. It's very weird. It's going to be good when it's done, but I can't wait to see it, to be quite honest. Touring plans. We're gonna rehearse for all of April, most of April. We're gonna do a European tour. We're actually going back into the clubs. We're gonna we're going to do clubs in Europe for about 3 weeks, just to get ourselves back into it. We haven't toured for a long time, and we just thought it'd be a really neat thing to do, rather than go straight back out in front of 20,000 people. That's if they're still out there. Hopefully they are. But we figured, like, we're going to just go in the clubs and just we're going to break a lot of the new songs in, and it's nice to do it in a small way. We did it on a lesser scale on the last album. We went out and did 6 or 7 shows around Ireland, and we did a couple of shows in Holland, and it was a good way of just breaking the songs in front of people. So we're doing it this time, but we're going to do it for but we're going to do it for 3 weeks. When that's finished, we are going to do a full-scale UK tour, which will also take in Southern Ireland as well. We'll play Dublin, go up north, play Belfast, do all of England and hopefully Scotland and somewhere in Wales. Then I think we're off to the Far East. We'll do Australia, Japan, and places in between, maybe like Singapore. We may even play Tasmania, because we'll definitely play New Zealand. And then sometime around September, October, I think we're going to be hitting North America and Canada, and we'll probably be here for 6-7 months, depending on the popularity of the band. It's going to be another long tour, but it won't be as bad as the last one. We can break it up a lot better this time. We can do 8 weeks, and then we can take a month off, and then we can do another 8 weeks. So we did on the last tour, we had to do a lot of spade work, which hopefully we won't have to do on this tour. We had to do 5 months tour in America, basically just to get ourselves back to zero. This time, hopefully, we can come in at the same level, which means we'll get away with just doing 5 or 6 months instead. We did 9 months altogether in America on the last tour. Hopefully, we'll get away with maybe 5 or 6 this time. Because we ended up just doing the same places twice. We'd go there, and they'd be nearly sold out, or we'd do one night. The album really took off, and we were back in the same buildings for 3 nights, sold out months in advance. It's that kind of thing, you know. We had to go and do it, really. We'd like to just go in and do the 3 nights straight away. But we have to wait and see. You know, we never take anything for granted, never will. And you're as big as your last album, which is why that we don't take the old 70s approach of, like, you know, you could put out 45 minutes worth of goose farts, as Peter Mensch likes to say, and people would buy it. That's not our style. You know, we want to go out there and make this thing. It's a piece of artwork. It's our chance to be Andy Warhol, Picasso, Rembrandt, whatever. This thing is going to be with us for the rest of our lives, so we've got to make it as good as we can. And it's your one and only opportunity to get it exactly the way you want it. Because you make the odd mistake live, you hope people don't notice it. Or if you do make a mistake, do it twice and think they did it on purpose. With a record, it's your one and only chance to get it right, and we want to take that opportunity to make sure that we do get it right. So that's always been our principle, and you know, we won't take anything for granted. And if there's an audience out there that want us to come and tour, then we'll be only too glad to do it for as long as it takes. Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I don't read Billboard every day, but you know, you check on it and see who's doing what. And yeah, I mean, you listen to everything that comes out. You know, just not through any major reason, like, you know, like, what's the competition now? Because we're arrogant enough to think that we can rise above all that anyway. It's like, I don't really care if Guns N' Roses are selling 10 million records, because I know that we can do better than that, you know. As good as they are, I think we're better. I'm forced to think that. It's my baby. My baby's more beautiful than yours. And yeah, we do. We follow everything, you know. We've currently, the big rage is Nirvana, and you know, I'm a bit of a sheep in the same department. I'm following that as well. I think it's great. I don't know how long I'm going to think it's great, but right now I think it's great. The way I thought Faith No More was great in 1989, and I'm looking forward to hearing them again. And you know, you've got Nirvana and Soundgarden and all these kind of Temple of the Dog and all this lot coming through. The kind of alternative scene is now becoming mainstream, which is fascinating, because it'll be interesting to see how long it is before these guys are scorned on, like Def Leppard and Bon Jovi are. It's like, oh yeah, they don't count, you know. But we go out and sell more records than anybody else, so somebody out there likes us. But we follow everything, you know. I mean, I bought the Guns N' Roses albums like the day they came out, because I wanted to hear them, you know. I'm a fan of music. I like all kinds of music, not just hard rock, heavy metal, alternative metal, whatever. I like everything from Kate Bush to Anthrax, you know. Not every song by those bands, you know, but enough to want to go out and at least listen to them, you know. You have to, you know, if you... I'm actually probably the only guy in the band that does listen to a lot of older stuff. Phil is a big Hendrix fan, but I've never, ever, ever seen him sitting listening to Hendrix. But I'm always digging out Slade, T-Rex, playing, you know, Zeppelin 2 or Queen 1 or, I don't know, you know, not necessarily Sabbath, Deep Purple in rock and things like that. I played that stuff. I like to counterbalance it. For every time I play Zeppelin 2, then I'll play a Soundgarden CD. Or I'll listen to Sabbath 4 and then I'll put on Ozzy's new album, just to see the difference, you know. So I listen to a lot of older stuff as well. I like to keep the balance. I think it's important. Yes, there will be a fifth Leppard. We've finished the album as a 4-piece, which is something that we vowed to do after Steve died. We did the first video for the album, the track Let's Get Rocked, as a 4-piece, which we fully intended to do. And as of now, everything else in the future is very open at the moment. There will be a fifth member. We don't know who it is. And hopefully, if we get him early enough, he will be featured on the second video. And he will be obviously featured on the tour. And he will do the club tours, and we will need to rehearse with him. So we just got to make sure we get the right guy. We've got a few people in mind. We're not actually going to sit down and advertise and have queues of guitarists. I will say that the most important credential that the potential guitar player has is a British passport. We won't take anybody that's not British. They don't have to live in England, they just have to be British. So with that in mind, we have half a dozen guys that we know that could potentially fit the bill. It's just a case of having a quick blow with them, tell them, you know, here's 3 songs, learn these 3 songs, come down, we'll hang out, go for a coffee, you know, just talk. It's more the personality thing that we're interested in. The guys that we've got in mind, we know they can play. The only thing that we really want is we hope they can sing, because we do a lot of vocals and we like to do a lot of vocals, and we really need somebody that can sing as well as play. But the most important thing is they're British and that they're a very nice guy, because we get on really well, and we just want somebody that, we don't want an egotistical person, we don't want a superstar, we just want somebody that wants to be in a band, that can carry the weight of his 20% and cover up for somebody else when they're having a bit of an off day, and they will be covered up for when they're having a bit of an off day, and just join in and be one of the boys. That's all we want, and that's hopefully all we'll get.